I'm Rachel. This is the morning of Saturday, September 3rd, 2022, and the return of the Library of Congress's National Book Festival in person. I'm here waiting for my dad. He's on his way up, and we're going to go together and hopefully have a bit of fun. If you've watched some of my recent videos, you know my cat Missy, she has cancer with a pretty dire prognosis, so I've put her in hospice care just at the beginning of the week. Right now, she's pretty normal still. Her decline is at the beginning, I guess is how you could put it. So I don't need to be here like administering lots of care or anything. If anything, perhaps I should stop hovering over her and let her sleep. I hope she will sleep and be in as of good health as possible, or at least enjoy, her little seats around the condo. Yeah, that's my plan for today. Maybe for the morning and afternoon a little bit. I have a few authors I hope to see speak and a book to get signed. Of course, everything kind of overlaps, a lot of the schedule of interesting authors, but then there's also walking around and lots of stuff just to do on the floor, and just the excitement, I guess, of being back in person to celebrate books. So I thought I would take you along with me, and here's to a fun time.
That's one of the biggest sort of themes of Stardust, is how stories change depending on who it is that's telling the story. So if you have a story, that's told by the people who are, hunting the Jinn, then of course the narrative is going to change. They're going to paint the Jinn as being these villainous entities. Whereas, by giving the Jinn the opportunity to tell those stories, then of course the narrative switches. And I think that's the nature of storytelling in general, and also kind of, just the idea behind history itself. History is always told by sort of the winners, or the people who are, the colonizers and whatnot. So in the Stardust Thief, I wanted to give the characters the opportunity to tell the stories from different perspectives, to show that, stories can be truths, but they can also be lies. And they can tell you the truth about a situation, but they can also be propaganda as well. Throughout the story, most of the characters that you meet, sort of in the general world, do believe that the Jinn are villainous entities. The main character, Lulian Nazadi, has a bodyguard who's a Jinn, and so her perception of what the Jinn are is obviously very different. And so that's something that I definitely wanted to play with throughout the story, and I think throughout the series as well. Just this idea that, stories are power, stories are powerful, and depending on who it is that's telling the story, that can have serious repercussions on our culture.
But I could not erase that contribution again, and so I knew I was going to have to write about it.
writing adult is more sort of stylistic than anything, because, you know, it's certainly not, you know, with regards to content, because War Girls has all sorts of wild stuff happening. Like, there's dismemberment, there's child soldiers, like all this stuff, right? And it's for 16-year-olds. Yeah, no, they get it. And also, too, like, it's never as though I'm writing down to any audience when I'm writing YA. In fact, if anything, I'm writing up to them. And so I can have this sort of, like, moral and emotional sophistication at work. But I think one of the things is that in Goliath, or like even in Riot Baby, I can have a one-page sentence about a prison rodeo, and I dare you to find me the YA editor that would allow me to get away with a one-page sentence about anything. And so it's like that. Like, there's stylistic stuff that I tried to pull off in Goliath that I just wouldn't be able to make work in a YA book. It's sort of like, you know, with YA is like playing basketball, right? Where the goal is to get the hoop. There are a number of ways you can do it. You can drive to the rim, you got the fadeaway jumper, you got the three ball, you can hit the corner. You know, if you're Steph Curry, you can shoot from the logo, all sorts of stuff. But the goal is the same. Whereas for me, writing adult is more like being in the Summer X Games, where the goal is to pull off the most physically dangerous and stylistically daring trick possible. Like, that's how you get points. And so that, to me, is much more akin to my experience writing Goliath. And so, yeah, so like, I do think it's really can have that same sort of, that moral sort of grayness or unclear, or ambiguity in both sort of markets, or at least you can get away with it. But I do find that, like, there are certain sentences that I just would not be able to keep in a no, too many subjunctive clauses.
I mean, teenagers like semicolons.